The diplomatic hall on Luna Station buzzed with alien voices speaking in languages that hurt human ears. Ambassador Thalon adjusted his crystalline, breathing apparatus and looked down at the human delegation with what could only be described as pity. His 6 eyes blinked in sequence as he prepared to deliver what the Galactic Council considered generous terms. "Humans of Earth," Thalon began, his voice carrying the musical quality of his species, "we have observed your recent attempts at space exploration. Your rockets that belch flame and smoke, your crude metal vessels that barely hold together in the vacuum of space, your weapons that still rely on chemical reactions." He paused, letting the assembled aliens chuckle at humanity's primitive nature. "We offer you protection under the Galactic Council's guidance." President Williams sat motionless in his chair, his weathered face showing no emotion. Behind him, Admiral Kane kept her hands folded, though her knuckles were white with tension. The other human delegates remained silent as Thalon continued his speech. "Your species shows promise," said Yorthuk, the Omnori representative, his cybernetic implants glowing softly. "But you must understand that the galaxy is dangerous. Your current technology level makes you easy prey for the hostile forces that roam between the stars." Dr. Wells, Earth's chief scientist, finally spoke up. "What exactly are you offering us?" "Supervision," replied Nethys, the Cathara delegate, her crystal body refracting the station's lights into rainbow patterns. "We will guide your technological development, teach you proper civilization, and protect you from threats you cannot comprehend." The humans exchanged glances. This was not the first contact scenario they had prepared for. They had expected trade, agreements, cultural exchanges, perhaps even military alliances. Instead, they were being offered something that sounded suspiciously like slavery wrapped in diplomatic language. "We appreciate your concern," President Williams said carefully, "but humanity has always preferred to make its own way in the universe." The alien delegates erupted in what passed for laughter among their species. Thalon's breathing apparatus whistled with amusement. "Your own way? Dear humans, you have not even mastered your own star system. Your ships move like wounded animals through space, leaving trails of debris and radiation. Your weapons are so primitive that they would not damage our children's toys." "Perhaps," Admiral Kane interjected, "but they are our weapons." This caused another wave of alien amusement. Yorthak's mechanical voice carried hints of condescension. "Human pride is admirable but foolish. We have scanned your military installations, your so-called defense grid. Nuclear weapons, kinetic projectiles, chemical explosives. These are relics from a bygone age of warfare. The Hectari Empire used similar weapons 10,000 years ago," Nethys added. "They were conquered by the Valthic Confederacy in a single day. The Valthic themselves fell to more advanced civilizations centuries later." Thalon leaned forward, his alien features attempting something like sympathy. "We do not mock you out of cruelty, humans. We offer guidance because we have seen what happens to proud species who refuse to accept their limitations. The galaxy has no patience for those who cling to outdated ways." The human delegation remained silent for a long moment. Dr. Wells broke the silence with a simple question. "What happens if we refuse your offer?" "Then you will face the galaxy alone," Thalon replied. "And when the real threats emerge, when the ancient evils that sleep between stars begin to stir, you will have no one to blame but your own stubborn pride." President Williams stood slowly, his movement drawing the attention of every alien in the room. "Ambassador Thalon, representatives of the Galactic Council, we thank you for your offer. We understand that it comes from a place of concern for our welfare." The aliens leaned forward, expecting acceptance. However, Williams continued, "Humanity must respectfully decline. We have spent our entire history learning to stand on our own feet. We see no reason to stop now." The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Alien voices raised in disbelief, their translators struggling to convey the shock and indignation. Thalon's breathing apparatus made sharp clicking sounds as he processed the rejection. "You cannot be serious," Yorthak said, his mechanical voice rising in pitch. "Your species has barely achieved faster-than-light travel. Your largest vessels carry fewer than 1,000 individuals. Your weapons technology is laughably primitive. And yet, Admiral Kane said, standing beside her president, they are ours. Nethys' crystal body flared with bright light, indicating extreme agitation. Do you have any idea what lurks in the dark spaces between stars? Do you know what happened to the Morvic Syndicate when they tried to go it alone? They were extinct within a generation. The Morvic Syndicate was not humanity. Dr. Wells replied calmly. The aliens continued their protests, but President Williams raised his hand for silence. Our decision is final. Humanity will chart its own course among the stars. We thank you for your time and hope that our paths will cross again under better circumstances. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Thalen called out one final warning. When the darkness comes, little humans, when the ancient horrors wake from their slumber, you will remember this day. You will remember that we offered you safety, and you chose pride instead. Admiral Kane paused at the door. Ambassador Thalen, humanity has faced darkness before. We have survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters that would have ended lesser species. We did not survive by hiding behind others. We survived by standing together and fighting. Fighting with what? Thalen's voice carried a note of genuine curiosity. Your crude weapons, your primitive ships, your chemical rockets? Kane smiled grimly. With whatever we have. The human delegation left Luna Station that day knowing they had made powerful enemies. The alien ships that had escorted them to the meeting departed without ceremony, their occupants no doubt reporting back to their homeworlds about the stubborn, primitive humans who had rejected the galaxy's protection. In the days that followed, alien visitors to Earth became increasingly rare. Trade offers were withdrawn, scientific exchanges canceled, and diplomatic communications grew cold. The Galactic Council, it seemed, had written humanity off as a lost cause, but humans had never needed the galaxy's approval to survive. They had thrived in the harshest environments their world could offer, from frozen tundras to scorching deserts, from the depths of the ocean to the edges of space. They had learned to adapt, to improvise, to make do with whatever tools were available. As the alien ships disappeared into the vast darkness of space, humanity turned its attention back to the stars. There was work to be done, frontiers to explore, and challenges to meet. They would face whatever came next the same way they had faced every challenge in their history, together, and on their own terms. The first sign of trouble came from the Kepler Observatory on Mars. Dr. Rebecca Torres had been monitoring deep space communications when the alien frequencies suddenly went silent. For 3 days, the galaxy's constant chatter of trade negotiations, scientific discussions, and diplomatic messages simply stopped. It's like someone turned off a switch, she reported to Earth Command. Every major civilization has gone completely dark. Admiral Kane studied the data from her office in Geneva. The silence was unnatural, disturbing in a way that made her skin crawl. Space was never truly quiet. Even in the darkest regions between stars, there were always signals, always some form of communication traveling between the thousands of worlds that made up galactic civilization. Any idea what could cause this? She asked. Dr. Torres shook her head. Nothing in our database. The last coherent transmission we received was from the Arcturus sector. It was just 2 words, repeated over and over. They return. The mystery deepened when long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures moving through the outer galaxy. These were not the controlled, efficient energy patterns of known alien technology. These readings showed something else entirely, raw, consuming power that seemed to grow stronger as it moved from system to system. Lieutenant Commander Foster burst into the command center without ceremony. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council. It's coming through on emergency frequencies. The image that appeared on the main screen was barely recognizable as Ambassador Thalen. His crystalline breathing apparatus was cracked, his usually pristine diplomatic robes torn and stained. Behind him, the diplomatic station where they had met months earlier was clearly in chaos. Humans of Earth, Thalen began, his musical voice now strained with desperation. We must put aside our differences. The Devourers have returned. The transmission was filled with static, but Thalan's words came through clearly enough. They appeared without warning in the Helix Nebula. Massive ships, larger than our cities, with technology that defies comprehension. They consume everything, planets, stars, entire civilizations. Nothing we have can stop them. The image flickered as explosions rocked the station. The Cathara homeworld is gone. The Omnary core systems are under assault. The Valthic Confederacy lasted less than 6 hours against their advanced forces. We need your help. Admiral Kane found herself staring at the desperation in Thalan's alien features. 6 months ago, the same being had laughed at humanity's primitive nature. Now he was begging for their assistance. "What are the Devourers?" she asked. "Ancient machines," Thalan replied. "They consumed half the galaxy before disappearing into the void millennia ago. We thought they were extinct, but they were merely sleeping, waiting, growing stronger. They adapt to every weapon, counter every defense. Our most advanced technology is useless against them." The transmission began to break up as the station's systems failed. "Please," Thalan's voice crackled through the static, "we were wrong about your species. We underestimated your potential. If you have any weapons, any technology that might help, we need it now." The screen went dark, leaving the human command staff in stunned silence. Dr. Wells was the first to speak. "If what he says is true, we're looking at a galactic extinction event. Run a full analysis of our sensor data," Admiral Kane ordered. "I want to know everything about these Devourers, their capabilities, their technology, their weaknesses." The next few days brought a steady stream of desperate communications from across the galaxy. The proud Cathara, who had dismissed human technology as primitive, were now asking for any weapons Earth could spare. The cybernetic Omnary, who had boasted about their advanced computer systems, reported that their networks were being systematically overwhelmed and turned against them. Most disturbing were the reports from the few survivors who had witnessed Devourer attacks firsthand. These were not random raiders or even traditional conquerors. The Devourers moved with purpose, stripping worlds of all useful materials before moving on to the next target. They left nothing behind, no ruins, no survivors, no trace that civilization had ever existed. "They're not just destroying planets," Dr. Torres reported during the emergency briefing. "They're harvesting them. Every atom of useful matter is being processed into new ships, new weapons, new Devourers. They're growing stronger with each system they consume." The tactical analysis was even more sobering. The Devourers' technology was beyond anything in the galactic database. Their ships were self-repairing, their weapons adapted to counter any defense, their armor seemed impervious to every known weapon type. "How long before they reach Earth?" President Williams asked during the emergency video conference. "At their current rate of expansion," Dr. Wells calculated, "approximately 4 months, maybe less if they change their approach vector." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Earth's defense grid, primitive by galactic standards, would last perhaps minutes against technology that had overwhelmed civilizations thousands of years more advanced, but Admiral Kane was studying the tactical reports with a different eye. "Something doesn't add up," she said finally. "If these Devourers are so advanced, why are they taking so long to expand? Why not just sweep through the galaxy in a matter of weeks?" "Maybe they're being cautious," suggested Colonel Martinez. "Testing defenses, analyzing resistance patterns. Or maybe," Kane continued, "they're having trouble with something. Look at these engagement reports from the Nephilim gas worlds. The Devourers took significant time to adapt to those atmospheric conditions. And here, in the Yik system, they actually retreated after the initial assault." Dr. Wells leaned forward. "You think they have limitations?" "Every system has limitations," Kane replied. "The question is whether we can figure out what theirs are before they figure out ours." As if summoned by her words, the emergency communication system activated. This time, the transmission came from multiple sources across the galaxy refugee. Fleets, scattered survivors, and the few remaining military installations that had escaped the Devourer advance. The message was simple and desperate. Earth Fleet, please respond. Devourer scouts have entered the Sol system. Repeat, hostile contacts are approaching your homeworld. All Allied forces are too distant to assist. You are on your own. Admiral Kane looked around the command center at her staff. These were the same people who had been dismissed as primitive by the galaxy's greatest civilizations. Their weapons were crude, their ships were simple, their tactics were considered barbaric by advanced standards, but they were human. And humans had never learned how to quit. Signal all defense stations, Kane ordered. Power up the grid, launch all available ships. It's time to show these devourers what happens when you threaten humanity's home. As alarms began to sound across Earth's military installations, the truth became clear. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations had failed to stop the Devourer advance. Their sophisticated weapons, their elegant tactics, their thousands of years of technological progress, none of it had been enough. Now it was up to the species that still fought with chemical rockets and nuclear weapons to save them all. The Devourer scout ships emerged from hyperspace like metallic nightmares, their hulls gleaming with an oily darkness that seemed to absorb light itself. Each vessel was the size of a small city, bristling with weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. Their sensors swept the Sol system, cataloging defenses, analyzing threats, preparing for another easy conquest. What they found defied their vast databases of galactic military doctrine, instead of the typical defensive posture. Ships arranged in protective formations around populated worlds, the human fleet was charging directly at them. Dozens of crude metal vessels, their hulls scarred and patched, their weapons primitive by galactic standards, were accelerating toward the superior alien force without hesitation. The lead Devourer ship, designated Primary Harvester by its controlling intelligence, processed this information with confusion. Every species they had encountered followed predictable patterns. First came attempts at negotiation, then defensive positioning, then retreat when the hopelessness of resistance became clear. But these humans seemed to have skipped directly to what could only be described as a suicidal attack. Commander Alex Rivera watched the approaching enemy from the bridge of the UES Defiance. His ship was one of Earth's newest destroyers, but compared to the alien vessels ahead, it looked like a toy. The Devourer scouts were each 10 times larger than his entire fleet combined. "Sir, we're receiving targeting data from the orbital platforms," reported Lieutenant Davis. "Nuclear mines are armed and ready," Rivera nodded grimly. The plan was simple because it had to be. Humanity's weapons were too primitive for complex tactics. They would hit the enemy with everything they had and hope it was enough. All ships. This is Defiance Actual, weapons free. Show them what humans do when someone threatens our home. The first salvo came from Earth's orbital defense platforms. Nuclear warheads, accelerated by magnetic launchers, streaked toward the Devourer ships. The alien vessels' energy shields flickered to life, designed to absorb and dissipate the plasma bursts and particle beams they had faced from other civilizations. The nuclear explosions that followed were unlike anything in the Devourer's experience. Instead of focused energy beams, these weapons released massive amounts of raw electromagnetic radiation. The carefully calibrated shields, designed to counter sophisticated attacks, overloaded and failed under the crude but overwhelming assault. "Direct hits on all 3 lead ships," Davis reported with barely contained excitement. "Their shields are down." But the Devourers were already adapting. Their hull plating shifted and changed, becoming more reflective to deflect the electromagnetic pulses. New shield generators came online, calibrated to handle the specific frequency of nuclear detonations. Rivera had expected this. The intelligence reports from the alien refugees had been clear. The Devourers learned from every attack. But humans had learned a few things too. "Launch the second wave," he ordered. "All ships, open fire with kinetic rounds." The Devourer Primary Harvester barely had time to process this new attack before the first depleted uranium shells struck its hull. The alien vessel's armor was designed to dissipate energy attacks, not to withstand the brutal impact of solid projectiles traveling at relativistic speeds. The shells tore through the adaptive hull plating like paper, punching deep into the ship's interior. Where energy weapons had been absorbed or deflected, these simple chunks of metal created devastating wounds in the alien vessel's structure. "Impossible," transmitted the primary harvester to its companions. "These weapons are pre-technological. No civilized species uses kinetic projectiles for space combat." The response came from the human fleet in the form of more kinetic rounds, followed by something even more primitive: chemical rockets loaded with conventional explosives. The Devourer's adaptive systems worked frantically to counter these attacks, but there was nothing sophisticated to counter. The humans were quite literally throwing rocks and exploding chemicals at their opponents. Lieutenant Commander Foster, commanding the destroyer UES Vengeance, watched her targeting display with grim satisfaction. "They're trying to adapt to our weapons, but we're not giving them anything to adapt to. It's like trying to develop immunity to being hit with a hammer." The battle quickly became a chaotic melee as human ships closed to point-blank range. The Devourers had expected to engage at long range with energy weapons, but the humans were fighting like their ancestors had fought on ancient battlefields, up close and personal. The UES Defiance rammed the damaged primary harvester, its reinforced hull crushing through the alien ship's weakened armor. Rivera felt the impact through the deck plating as his ship's momentum drove it deep into the enemy vessel. "Boarding parties, go!" he shouted over the sound of twisting metal. What followed was perhaps the most surreal combat in galactic history. Human soldiers, armed with chemical explosives and ballistic weapons, fought their way through the corridors of an advanced alien vessel. The Devourer's internal defenses, designed to counter energy weapons and sophisticated assault tactics, were overwhelmed by the simple brutality of human warfare. Sergeant Miller led his squad through a breach in the Devourer's hull, his rifle firing armor-piercing rounds that tore through alien machinery with devastating effect. The ship's defensive systems tried to adapt, but there was nothing complex about bullets. They were just pieces of metal that created holes in whatever they hit. "Sir, we've reached what looks like a command center," Miller reported over the radio. "Setting charges now." The explosion that followed gutted the primary harvester's control systems. Without its central intelligence, the massive ship began to drift, its weapons falling silent. But the victory came at a cost. The Defiance was badly damaged, its hull breached in a dozen places. Half of Rivera's crew was dead or wounded, and his ship was barely spaceworthy. "Status report," he called out. "2 enemy ships destroyed, 1 disabled," Davis reported. "Our casualties are heavy, but we're still functional." Rivera looked at the tactical display. The human fleet had been reduced to half its original size, but they had accomplished something that no other species had managed. They had actually hurt the Devourers. "Signal Earth Command," he ordered. "Tell them we've proven these things can be killed. They adapt to advanced technology, but they don't know how to handle good old-fashioned human stubbornness." As the surviving Devourer scout ships retreated to hyperspace, their controlling intelligences transmitted a detailed report to the main fleet. The humans, they reported, were unlike any species previously encountered. Their weapons were primitive. Their tactics were crude, but their effectiveness was undeniable. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers had been forced to withdraw from a battle. The species that the galaxy had dismissed as backward had accomplished what the most advanced civilizations could not. The message that went out through the galaxy's communication networks was short but electrifying. Humanity has engaged Devourer forces in the Sol system. Enemy ships have been destroyed. Repeat, the Devourers can be defeated. For the first time since the invasion began, there was hope. The crude, primitive humans with their chemical rockets and nuclear weapons had proven that the unstoppable force could in fact be stopped. All it took was a species too stubborn to know when they were beaten. The refugee ships began arriving at Earth within days of the news spreading through the galaxy. Battered alien vessels, their hulls scarred from Devourer attacks, limped into the Sol system carrying the survivors of a dozen different civilizations. They came not as conquerors or diplomats, but as desperate refugees seeking sanctuary from the species they had once dismissed as primitive. Ambassador Thalan's ship was among the first to arrive. The elegant diplomatic vessel that had once carried him to Luna Station was now a shell of its former self, its crystalline hull panels shattered and its propulsion systems held together with what appeared to be mechanical tape. When he stepped onto the docking platform at Luna Station, his 6 eyes were dim with exhaustion and defeat. "Ambassador," President Williams greeted him with genuine warmth. "We're glad you made it safely." Thalan's breathing apparatus wheezed as he struggled to find words. "President Williams, I come before you not as a representative of the Galactic Council, but as a survivor. My people, my world, they are gone. The Devourers consumed everything in the Arcturus sector." Dr. Wells, who had been analyzing the refugee ship's sensor data, looked up from her tablet. "How many survivors are we talking about?" "Across all known species, perhaps 10 million individuals scattered in refugee fleets throughout the galaxy, out of a combined population of over 500 billion. Thalan's voice carried the weight of unimaginable loss. The Kithara crystal cities that took millennia to grow were ground into raw materials in hours. The Omnary network that connected 1,000 worlds was turned against itself. The Yix gas dwellers suffocated as their atmospheres were processed into fuel. The human delegation exchanged glances. The scale of destruction was beyond anything they had imagined. Entire civilizations, some of which had existed for tens of thousands of years, had been erased from the galaxy in a matter of weeks. "What do you need from us?" Admiral Kane asked. "Your weapons," Thalan replied without hesitation. "Your crude, primitive, wonderful weapons. The Devourers cannot adapt to what they cannot comprehend. Your nuclear devices, your kinetic projectiles, your chemical explosives, they are the only things that have proven effective against the enemy." Within hours, Earth's industrial capacity was being retooled for war production. Factories that had been producing civilian goods were converted to manufacture nuclear warheads. Shipyards that had been building exploration vessels were repurposed to create missile carriers. The entire human economy shifted to support what military analysts were calling the most desperate conflict in galactic history. But it was not just weapons that the refugees needed. They needed to learn an entirely new way of thinking about warfare. Colonel Martinez found himself in the unusual position of teaching military tactics to beings who had been fighting wars since before humanity had discovered fire, the Kithara. Delegates, their crystal bodies refracting light in patterns that indicated confusion, struggled to understand the human concept of acceptable losses. "You willingly sacrifice ships and personnel for tactical advantage?" asked Christex, one of the few surviving Kithara military commanders. "This is not how civilized warfare is conducted." "Civilized warfare doesn't work against the Devourers," Martinez replied bluntly. "They adapt to civilized tactics. But they don't understand desperation, and they don't understand sacrifice." The lessons were painful for both sides. The aliens had to abandon millennia of military doctrine that emphasized efficiency and minimal casualties. The humans had to teach their allies to think like cornered animals, to fight with the ferocity that came from having nothing left to lose. Lieutenant Commander Foster worked with the Nephilim survivors, teaching them to weaponize their own industrial processes. The gas-dwelling species had always been peaceful. Their technology focused on environmental harmony rather than warfare. "Your atmospheric processors," Foster explained, "they can be modified to create chemical weapons. The Devourers need to breathe, even if it's not the same gases we use." The Nephilim delegate, a being that existed as a controlled storm of chemical reactions, pulsed with distress. "We have never created weapons designed to kill. Our entire philosophy is built on preservation and growth." "Then think of it as preserving your species," Foster replied. "The Devourers are coming, and philosophy won't stop them. Chlorine gas will." Similar conversations were happening across the Sol system as human military advisors worked with refugee commanders to develop new tactics. The Omnari learned to overload their cybernetic systems to create devastating electromagnetic pulses. The Yix discovered that their natural ability to manipulate magnetic fields could be used to accelerate kinetic projectiles to incredible velocities, but perhaps the most important lesson was psychological. The galaxy's civilizations had become complacent, relying on their technological superiority to solve problems. When faced with an enemy that could counter their technology, they had no answer. Humans, on the other hand, had never had the luxury of technological superiority. They had learned to fight with whatever tools were available, to improvise solutions under pressure, to keep fighting even when victory seemed impossible. Dr. Wells worked with the refugee scientists to understand the Devourer's weaknesses. They're not truly invincible, she explained during a joint briefing. They're just really good at adapting to predictable threats. But human warfare has never been predictable. Your species, observed Yorthek, the Omnari survivor, you approach conflict as if it were a creative exercise. You find new ways to cause destruction that we would never consider. That's because we had to, Admiral Kane replied. Every enemy we've ever faced has been bigger, stronger, or more numerous than us. We learned to win by being unpredictable. The first joint human-alien strike was launched against a Devourer harvesting operation in the Vega system. The alien ships, now equipped with human weapons and crewed by personnel trained in human tactics, approached the enemy with a new kind of aggression, the Cathara crystal ship Eternal Light. Its hull now bristling with nuclear missile launchers led the assault. Its commander, Crystal Singer Valix, had been one of the most decorated officers in the old Cathara military. Now he was learning to fight like a human. "Target their harvesting arrays," he ordered, his musical voice carrying new notes of hardness. "All batteries continuous fire." The human-designed weapons tore into the Devourer facility with brutal efficiency. Where once the Cathara had fought with elegant precision, now they fought with human determination. The Devourer's adaptive systems, still trying to counter the predictable tactics of civilized warfare, were overwhelmed by the chaotic assault. The battle was won, but the cost was high. The Eternal Light was heavily damaged, its crystal hull cracked, and its crew decimated. But for the first time since the invasion began, a Devourer facility had been destroyed. "We saved the system," Valix reported, his voice filled with wonder. "We actually saved them." As news of the victory spread through the galaxy, more refugee fleets began to converge on Earth. The humans had proven that the Devourers could be defeated, but victory would require every surviving ship and every remaining warrior. The galaxy's greatest civilizations had fallen, but in their place something new was emerging. A coalition of survivors united not by technology or diplomacy, but by the simple human refusal to accept defeat. The Devourers had conquered the galaxy's greatest powers, but they had never faced anything like the fury of a species that had learned to fight with its back against the wall. And now that fury was spreading to every refugee, every survivor, every being who had lost everything to the ancient enemy. The tide was turning, one bloody battle at a time. The Helix Nebula burned with unnatural light as the massive Devourer construct continued its work. The primary harvesting complex, a structure the size of a small moon, had been consuming star systems for months, converting entire worlds into raw materials for the enemy fleet. Around it, thousands of Devourer ships moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the processed remains of conquered civilizations. Admiral Kane stood in the command center of the UES Vengeance, studying the tactical display with grim determination. The combined human-alien fleet that had assembled for this final assault was the largest military force in recorded galactic history, but it was also the last one. If they failed here, there would be no second chance. "Final count, Admiral," reported Commander Foster. 847 vessels from 12 different species, every surviving ship in the galaxy. Kane nodded slowly. The numbers were impressive, but she knew the reality was far different. Most of these ships were damaged refugees, their crews exhausted, and their weapon systems cobbled together from human designs. They were facing an enemy force that outnumbered them 5-1, with technology that still surpassed anything the galaxy could produce. Signal from the Cathara flagship, Communications Officer Lewis announced. Crystal Singer Valix reports. His batteries are loaded and ready. Through the viewport, Kane could see the Eternal Light, its crystal hull now completely covered in human-designed missile launchers. The elegant alien vessel looked like a floating weapons platform, its original beauty sacrificed for firepower. Similar modifications had been made to ships across the fleet, Omnary cruisers bristling with kinetic cannons, Nephilim bioships, loaded with chemical warheads, Yix vessels converted into electromagnetic pulse generators. Dr. Wells, what's your assessment of the target? Kane asked. Dr. Wells looked up from her analysis station, her face pale but determined. The harvesting complex is the key to their entire operation. It's not just processing materials, it's coordinating the entire Devourer fleet through quantum entanglement. If we can overload its central processor, we can cascade the feedback through their entire network. And how do we overload something that size? We need to get inside the complex and manually trigger a resonance cascade in the quantum core. The explosion will propagate through every connected Devourer ship simultaneously. Kane felt her heart sink. That's a suicide mission. Yes, Wells replied simply. Whoever goes in won't be coming back? The plan was desperate, but it was the only chance they had. The fleet would engage the Devourer forces in a massive frontal assault, drawing their attention while a small strike team penetrated the harvesting complex. The mission would require someone willing to sacrifice everything for the chance to save the galaxy. I'll take the strike team, Kane said without hesitation. Admiral, you're needed here to coordinate the fleet, Foster protested. The fleet can follow the battle plan without me. But this mission needs someone who understands both human tactics and alien technology. Kane's voice carried the weight of command. Besides, I've been fighting these things since they first arrived. I want to be the one to finish it. The battle began at 0800 hours Galactic Standard Time. The combined fleet emerged from hyperspace in a perfect attack formation, human destroyers, leading the charge while alien vessels provided support fire. The Devourer response was immediate and overwhelming. Energy beams that could vaporize entire cities lashed out from the enemy fleet, striking the approaching ships with devastating effect. The Cathara vessel Harmony's End was the first to die, its crystal hull shattering under the impact of a focused plasma burst. The Omnari cruiser Unity's voice followed seconds later, its cybernetic crew overwhelmed by a virus-like attack that turned their own systems against them. But the Allied fleet kept coming. Human tactics had taught them that acceptable losses were sometimes necessary for victory. Ships that would have retreated under the old rules of warfare now pressed forward, their crews knowing that this was their last chance to make a difference. The Use Defiance, now under the command of Captain Rivera, led a squadron of destroyers in a direct assault on the Devourer capital ships. His vessel, scarred from dozens of battles, looked like a rust bucket compared to the sleek enemy vessels, but it carried something they didn't, the desperate courage of humanity. All batteries continuous fire, Rivera ordered as his ship closed. To point-blank range. Give them everything we have. Nuclear warheads and kinetic rounds hammered into the Devourer hull, creating massive breaches that vented atmosphere and debris into space. The enemy ship's adaptive armor struggled to counter the chaotic assault, but there was no pattern to adapt to, just raw destruction delivered by beings who had learned to fight with whatever they had. While the main battle raged, Admiral Kane led her strike team through the chaos in a modified transport ship. The UES Hammer was little more than an armored shell wrapped around the most powerful engines Earth could produce, designed for one purpose: to penetrate the harvesting complex's defenses and deliver its payload. Devourer interceptors closing on our position, reported Lieutenant Davis, Kane's pilot. They're trying to cut us off. Evasive maneuvers, Kane ordered. Get us to that complex. The Hammer twisted through space, dodging energy beams and missile strikes as it raced toward the massive structure. Behind them, the galaxy's last fleet fought a desperate holding action. Trading ships for time, lives for the chance that Kane's mission might succeed. The harvesting complex loomed ahead like a mechanical planet, its surface covered in processing facilities that glowed with the energy of 1,000 consumed worlds. Docking bays the size of cities opened and closed as devourer ships delivered their cargo of harvested materials. There, Kane pointed to a maintenance port near the complex's core. That's our way in. The Hammer's hull groaned under the stress as Davis pushed the engines beyond their design limits. Enemy fire bracketed their position, but the little ship's erratic course made it impossible to target effectively. They were flying like humans had always flown, by instinct, desperation, and sheer bloody-minded determination. The transport slammed into the docking port with bone-jarring force, its armored nose crushing through the alien airlock. Kane and her team of 12 volunteers, humans, Cathara, Omnuri, and Nephilim, fought their way into the complex carrying everything from nuclear charges to chemical explosives. The interior of the harvesting complex was a nightmare of organic technology and mechanical precision. Corridors pulsed with alien energy while processing chambers converted matter into the raw materials needed for new devourer ships. The air itself seemed to hum with malevolent intelligence. "Quantum core is 2 kilometers deeper," Dr. Wells reported, consulting her scanner. "Heavy resistance expected." They fought their way through corridors defended by devourer maintenance. Drones, their weapons adapted for ship-to-ship combat, proving devastating in the confined spaces. Kane's rifle, loaded with depleted uranium rounds, punched through alien armor with brutal efficiency, while her Cathara companion, Crystal Singer Thex, used focused light beams to blind enemy sensors. The deeper they went, the more the complex seemed to come alive around them. Walls shifted to block their path, floors opened to reveal processing chambers designed to consume organic matter, and the air itself became toxic as the devourers tried to flush out the intruders. "Sir, we're down to half strength," reported Sergeant Miller, his armor scorched from close combat with alien defenders. "The complex is actively trying to kill us." "Then we kill it first," Kane replied, her voice carrying the grim determination that had carried humanity through every crisis in their history. They reached the quantum core chamber after what felt like hours of fighting. The room was vast, its walls lined with crystalline structures that pulsed with barely contained energy. At the center, a sphere of pure light floated in a containment field, its surface rippling with patterns that hurt to look at directly. "That's it," Dr. Wells whispered. "The quantum core that controls the entire devourer network." Kane looked around at her surviving team members. 3 humans, 2 Cathara, and 1 Omnuri remained. They had come so far, lost so much, all for this moment. "How long do we have to set the charges?" she asked. "The resonance cascade will take approximately 30 seconds to build," Wells replied. "But the explosion will be instantaneous after that." Kane nodded grimly. There would be no escape, no last-minute rescue. This was the end of the line for all of them. "It's been an honor serving with you all," she said to her team. "Let's finish this." They worked quickly, placing nuclear charges around the quantum core while the complex's defenses tried desperately to stop them. Energy beams lashed out from the walls, but the team pressed forward, their movements coordinated by the desperate efficiency of beings who knew they were already dead. "Charges set," Miller reported. "All teams, fall back to minimum safe distance." Kane looked at the timer on her wrist device. In 60 seconds, the charges would detonate, the quantum core would overload, and the resulting cascade would destroy every devourer ship in the galaxy. But there was no minimum safe distance. The explosion would vaporize everything within 100 kilometers. "Sir," Crystal Singer Thex spoke up, his musical voice carrying surprising warmth. "My people have a saying, the brightest light shines just before the crystal shatters. We have been that light." Kane smiled grimly. "Then let's make sure the galaxy remembers us." She activated the timer and opened a communication channel to the fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Kane. Mission accomplished. Get clear of the complex immediately. It's been an honor serving with you all." The response from the fleet was immediate and overwhelming. Voices from a dozen species, survivors of civilizations that had stood for millennia, all united in gratitude and respect for the humans who had saved them. "Admiral," came Captain Rivera's voice over the comm, "Earth Command wants me to tell you that humanity is proud of you." "Tell them," Kane replied, "that we were just doing what humans do. We never learned how to quit." The explosion that followed was visible from 3 star systems away. The harvesting complex disintegrated in a burst of pure energy that outshone nearby stars. The quantum cascade propagated through the enemy network in seconds, overloading every Devourer ship simultaneously. Across the galaxy, the ancient enemy fell silent. Ships that had terrorized civilizations for months drifted powerless through space, their controlling intelligences finally overwhelmed by the sheer impossibility of what humanity had achieved. In the aftermath, as the surviving fleet regrouped and began the long journey home, Ambassador Thalen transmitted a message to Earth. "People of humanity," he said, his voice carrying deep respect, "today you have saved not just our lives, but the very concept of life itself. The galaxy mocked you for your primitive ways, your crude weapons, your stubborn refusal to accept limitations. We were wrong. Your greatest strength was never your technology. It was your unwillingness to surrender in the face of impossible odds." The victory celebration that followed lasted for days, but it was tinged with the knowledge of what it had cost. Admiral Kane and her strike team had given their lives to save the galaxy, joining the thousands of humans who had died in the desperate fight against the Devourers. But they had won. The species that had been dismissed as backward, primitive, and crude had accomplished what the galaxy's greatest civilizations could not. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, not through advanced technology or sophisticated tactics, but through the simple human refusal to accept defeat. The galaxy would never mock humanity again.